We are calling to order the special meeting of the Santa Monica Planning Commission on July 1st, 2020. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Fonda Bernardi? Commissioner Fonda Bernardi?
Yes.
Commissioner Fresco?
Here.
Commissioner Landris?
Here.
Commissioner McKinnon?
Yes.
Commissioner Reese?
Present.
And Chair Lambert.
Here. Okay, let's have the planning director's report. David?
Good evening, or good afternoon, commissioners. Jing, is there a slide?
I got it. It should be up right now.
There we go. All right, so thank you. Obviously not a lot to report for upcoming Planning Commission agendas. We don't have a meeting scheduled in council. We are obviously working on figuring out what comes to the commission going forward, obviously starting in August, and we'll get back with everybody on that. But at this point, we don't have anything to report in terms of dates. Upcoming to the City Council, the revision to the demolition IZO is going on July 14th. And then July 28th will be the renewal of the, or consideration of the renewal of the exclusive negotiating agreement for the Fourth and Arizona project. Some things were moved around a bit. So it looks like at this point, some of the housing items we had scheduled for July will likely move to the first meeting in August, is my understanding.
That be the DCP stuff, David?
I believe so, yes. But we'll let you know for sure. But it looks like that will likely move to August. And that concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions? And I would encourage you to use the chat box, but I've almost given up on that.
I have a question.
Okay, Richard.
Mr. Martin, given the severity of the corona pandemic, which is not abating anytime soon, how do you intend to run the Planning Commission going forward if we can't physically meet for 2 or 3 more months, which I think is increasingly likely? In fact, if we can get back together before the end of the year, that would be surprising. You surely can't.
Yeah, no. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said we surely can't hold up the pipeline of discussion about development projects, including the large projects. So what's the plan?
Yeah, I think we're obviously aware of the issue and aware of the concern. We need to have a conversation internally about really how boards and commissions move forward and what's appropriate in terms of, how long we go without meeting in person and what we're able to do. Obviously, we're taking it kind of as it comes. So we will keep that issue in mind and let the commission know if the format of the meetings is going to change anytime soon. I don't anticipate that it will, because I think you're right, this will go on for a while. But we haven't really thought beyond the current format of how we're running the commission meetings at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions of staff? Okay. There are no minutes to approve. I'm sorry. Are there commissioner announcements?
Yes, I've got one.
What is that? Okay.
All right, Chair. So I was appointed to the Planning Commission in 2011. In 2012, I was a candidate for election on a controlling development platform and was supported by a lot of the community. Sometime in 2016, the Fair Practices in Politics Commission launched a secret investigation into that election and the conduct of the election. They have been investigating since, through multiple hearings, secret investigations, interrogation of bank accounts both here and overseas, and it's been a long-running issue. Ultimately, 2 years ago, they filed charges, 7 of them, involving many tens of thousands of dollars. Obviously, it's been a costly process. I'm happy to tell you that as of Monday, their case completely collapsed. There was no evidence of the 7 charges that they laid some years ago. And I'd have to say what a complete fiasco on behalf of the FPPC it's proved. From the outset, I said there was no evidence. I said there was nothing to suggest that anything had been done other than completely ethically right, and that there was a very clear evidence I knew the difference between right and wrong. They didn't accept it. Now I feel as if they've been completely humiliated by the withdrawal of this charge. It seems, according to my lawyer, that there may be one person a year who takes them on. And I've been that one person for the last 4 years. Nonetheless, all's well that ends well, I guess. But through it, I did see it as an attempt by the FPPC to intimidate a planning commissioner. And given the sensitivity of the things that we discuss in this city, namely development with big money developers, I didn't feel that anything other than complete vindication was reasonable. That I have now had. So, Chair, you might want to resume normal broadcasting.
Thank you for sharing that.
And congratulations, Richard.
Congratulations.
Trust me, it's not the most pleasant of things to have happen, and almost everybody else rolls over and signs the agreement they give you, which suggests you did something wrong, for a reduction in fines. I am not that person, and I told them right from the outset, you have picked the wrong person to try and screw over. I will never sign anything that says I did something wrong. And of course, I did not. So, it's an interesting exercise when you have lawyers retained constantly. I would say thank you to my wife and to the people that helped me on that election campaign 8 years ago. And after 4 years, you would have thought they had a little more than they have no evidence at all.
Wow. Sorry you had to go through that.
Needless to say, although generally I'm a happy person, not very happy about the process.
Thank you.
Oh, one last thing. I believe there's a need for an FPPC. I know that there's huge amounts of money thrown into elections, every election cycle, both in this city and every other city. And when there are people walking around in this city who've thrown money into elections to influence the outcome and haven't been looked at, and someone who basically self-funded and was supported by members of the community gets the interrogation, I think that's unreasonable. But I do know that we need an FPPC and it needs to be really strong. I would not suggest that this is a good process to have to go through. So thank you.
We lost Leslie.
Sean, I think you're in charge.
Okay. Are there other? Yes, I saw Commissioner Fresco had a announcement.
Mine is much more lighthearted than the announcement that Richard made, although maybe not as triumphantly good news. But just every year at this time, I remind us all that our city's birthday is on July 10th, and that this year the city of Santa Monica will be 145 years old. And so that will happen before next we meet. So I just wanted you all to remember. That's it.
Thank you. I personally can't wait for 46, but yeah, thank you.
I assume,
all right.
Chair, I just assume the whole night has been put on for Commissioner Fresco's benefit. She may have a whole hour on some of the issues that we're about to discuss anyway.
That's right. So let me say for the public that item 7A has been withdrawn. We're moving on to, we have no, let me be very clear. I believe that concludes Planning Commissioner announcements. We have no minutes to approve. And item 7A, a statement of official action for 1820 Broadway has been withdrawn by staff and will return to us at a future date. We have no consent calendar, and so we will move on to item 9A, 1436 2nd Street, a development review permit, major modification request, and a conditional use permit. Before we hear the staff report, may we have ex partes?
And the chair's come back, although we can't hear her.
No, we still can't hear her. Can we start with ex partes? No? I'm going to suggest that while Leslie is resolving her audio, that we start with Commissioner Fonda Bernardi.
No, no ex parte.
Okay. Commissioner Fresco?
Yes, I do. In December 2019, I was in David Kaplan's office on another matter, and we looked at pictures of the Rap Saloon and possible changes to the door to the saloon. I, at that time, had no idea that the project was going to be any more than just a certificate of appropriateness for changes to that landmark, and that it would end up coming before this commission, so we didn't discuss anything but the door, which is not really in our purview exactly. And yesterday, when I was reviewing the packet, I realized that I knew of another photograph of the Rap Saloon from much earlier than we previously discussed. And I contacted Bison Archives, who I knew owned the photo, and got a copy which I forwarded to you guys. And then today, not at my request, but out of the blue, probably because he saw it on our agenda, Roger Genzer sent me yet another historic photograph of the Rap Saloon, which I also forwarded to you guys and for the public record. And I did call Roger to ask him what year it was, and we discussed the many uses of the Rap Saloon.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm back. Commissioner Landros, do you have ex parte?
I do, in fact. All right. So this morning, Danielle Wilson of Unite Here Local 11 called me at 10:17. We spoke for about 57 minutes, though not exclusively about this. She added Jonah Breslau from Lane, I believe, to the call, and we discussed the rooms proposed, the types of the room types, room rates, and the various items related to the nonprofit status of the applicant. At 3:09, for 15 minutes, I spoke with Ken Kutcher of Harding Larmore and discussed the applicant's nonprofit status and intended use. And at 5:06 p.m., I received a text message from Patricia Hoffman in favor of the project and referring to the DTSM letter.
Okay, Commissioner McKinnon.
Yes, I spoke to Danielle Wilson of Unite Here at 11:15 this morning for about 8 minutes. And again at 4 o'clock this afternoon for about 5 minutes. We discussed room rates and use of the rooms going forward, as well as its place in the hostel. And I've also been past the property on several occasions.
Commissioner Reese.
Happy to report I have no ex parte.
Nor do I. Could we have the staff report, please?
Hi, good evening, Planning Commissioners. This is Grace Page, Senior Planner, and I'll be presenting the expansion proposal for the hostel at 1436 2nd Street. Just to give you a quick brief of the location of the project, it is located on the west side of 2nd Street between Broadway and Santa Monica Boulevard. The zoning is downtown Community Plan BCD, which is the downtown Bayside Conservation District. The parcel is 15,000 square feet in size. It does have a historic Rap Saloon located in the front of the property, and the landmark is also recognized as a landmark parcel. This is just a recent image of the hostel as viewed from 2nd Street, just to give you a little bit of background. The entitlements for the hostel and the preservation of the Rap Saloon originally occurred back in the 80s in 1987. After it was constructed and opened for operation, a smaller addition came before the Planning Commission in 2002. And now, at this moment, they're also seeking to do an additional expansion. The expansion is triggering a development review permit. It is a tier 2. The overall square footage is approximately 15,600 square feet or so, and triggers the tier 2 DRP. A major modification is also being sought for as it relates to the expansion at the rear and to provide a little bit of setback relief for the rear alley setback. And also, a prior conditional use permit was very specific to the current layout of the hostel, and then as an expansion is necessitating the amendment of a prior CUP. When looking at the existing square footage and the proposed expansion, the total FAR is 2.81, which is less than 3 as allowed by the district. The construction is located on the rear half of the property, and it's comprised of prefabricated modular construction. There will be bicycle parking available and access if there's a bike lane right there on 2nd Street. A TDM plan is also preliminarily being reviewed by our mobility division, and along with the tier 2 benefits that accompany projects in the downtown district. So in this image, you're looking at an aerial view, basically looking west. So in the forefront, we have the Rap Saloon building out by the yellow notation there. The red outlines the property itself, and the green is basically highlighting the location of where the expansion or the addition is being proposed. This is a good image to just show you the context of the building sizes and sort of the arrangement along 2nd Street and then back behind the buildings that are fronting Ocean Avenue at the upper portion of the image. When looking at the proposal from the 2nd Street elevation, you can see that not much of the addition, or perhaps none of it, might be visible from the street. In the lower half here, this is basically the outline of the addition at the back, which is a total of 5 stories, where the existing building is at 4 stories. This is the demolition proposal in terms of the walls that would need to be removed and the infrastructure that would be removed to make way for the addition. So the existing courtyard will basically be reconfigured. There is an existing dining hall that would be demolished and a surface parking lot off the alley that would need to be cleared to make way for the addition. The ground floor of the addition is traditional construction. It does not involve the modular prefabricated units. So in this ground floor plan, the green is just outlining the outdoor spaces as they would be existing in the front at the entry court, located here. And then the newly formed courtyard space in the center of the project. There is a condition that is applied to the project related to not allowing for live entertainment or amplified music in these outdoor spaces. The yellow area is highlighting the major modification request. The setback at the rear alley is twofold. It is a dimension of a 2-foot setback from the rear property line, but also is requiring to have a clearance of 16 feet of height. Due to the constraints of trying to match up the floor levels of the existing building with the addition, the project is proposing to provide a 14-foot clearance in lieu of 16. But because the setback cannot be satisfied from both perspectives, a major modification is being requested at this time. This is the second floor plan. This is where you'll start seeing the modular construction. The yellow is just sort of highlighting where that 2-foot, that additional clearance to 16 feet is not being provided. As you can see, the layout provides for a central corridor with both dorm rooms and family rooms off to each side of the addition. So we work our way up. Level 4, very similar layout. And then the 5th floor, which is a new floor and not connected to the rest of the building, does offer some roof deck and outdoor spaces. Again, similarly, the condition number 6 is going to apply to these spaces, as well as condition number 7, which would limit times for guests to occupy these spaces. Alluding to the prefabricated modules that are being proposed, this is in an effort to also provide for a sustainable approach to the addition, as well as minimizing construction time. So as you can see, I believe this is an image from the company that shows the crane lifting these modular units and placing them appropriately on the site. Construction is anticipated to primarily be taken off the alley. There is not an intention to provide for construction on 2nd Street and have materials or modules floating over the building. And as such, the project would require a construction management plan. So there would be much coordination with the activities involved for the construction. Now, the project is an addition, but there are also some improvements that are being, minor improvements that are being proposed for the wrap saloon. So up in the front, to improve the access and the accessibility to this space, they are looking to provide for a floor level that is flush with the sidewalk. So that would involve lowering the floor by removing a raised interior floor that is currently within the building, and removing the non-original concrete steps as shown on the left-hand image, and then looking to extend that door down to the sidewalk level. So on the left-hand side, you're seeing what's existing from the street, and on the right-hand side is what you would be seeing if the proposal is approved. The overall design of the project is subject to the Landmarks Commission review, as they would be acting as the design review entity. The applicant went before the Landmarks Commission for a preliminary design review discussion. This discussion was primarily focused on the wrap saloon building itself, and the applicant was encouraged to find additional information and or evidence of original features of the wrap building when they return. From a California Environmental Quality Act perspective, the project has 2 exemptions that would apply. It's a Class 32 infill development, and also from the historic preservation standpoint, a Class 31, as the expansion is done in a manner that is consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of the historic properties. So I just wanted to do an overall overview of the public noticing and comments, standard mailing, notice posted in the daily press, as well as on-site poster on the property. Staff received 1 request to review the public file, 1 telephone call regarding general project information, an email comment opposing the expansion and noise concerns, 1 representative. There was also 1 letter from the downtown DTSM Business Improvement District that I have not listed here, but that was also submitted in support of the proposal, and also 2 images of the wrap saloon between 1889 and 1905 and 1911 that Commissioner Fresco had alluded to at the beginning. I have them here on the next slide. And these are the 2 images that were forwarded to staff for the record. In conclusion, the proposed project is packaged with community benefits that will assist with the downtown and the vision. The proposed project is also in keeping with all the sensitivities that are related to preservation with the Rap Saloon and the landmark parcel. The LUCE and the downtown community plan provides provisions and goals for visitor serving uses and a lively center for the downtown area. Staff is recommending approval of the development review permit, the associated major modification for the setback, as well as the conditional use permit to be approved, and we have provided a draft statement of official action. A most recent revised version was sent to you this afternoon and is also posted on the agenda for those that may be watching from home. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Grace. Let me also remind or let the people who are watching or listening to this meeting know that if you wish to comment on this item, you should email us, and the email address is planningcomment@smgov.net. And the staff will read your comments into the record and to us if you wish to make them. So are there staff questions? Let's go down the line. Start with Commissioner Fonda Bernardi.
I have no questions.
Okay, Commissioner Fresco.
None at this time.
Commissioner Landris.
Yes, thank you for that report. We received a written letter from Ellis Raskin of Santa Monicans for the Future, I believe, or Santa Monica Alliance for the Future, raising a question about the economy rates. As I'm reading from the letter, at the very least, the project approval should include conditions that mandate overnight accommodations at 1436 2nd Street be provided at, quote, economy, end quote, rates as defined by the city's 2018 Coastal Land Use Plan, DLUP, page 55, defining, quote, economy, end quote, rooms as costing $105 to $140 per night. I was wondering whether I had some conversations with Heidi about this earlier, and I was wondering whether their staff wanted to give some clarifications about whether that was applicable, and if so, what might be applicable in this case.
Ready? Hello.
I'm happy to jump in. Sorry.
Hi.
Thank you.
Do you want to go, Jing? Jing can start.
I can start. Yeah. So because in terms of consistency with the general plan and with the draft or with the LUP, we do want to clarify that the draft LUP is just that. It's not been adopted by the Coastal Commission yet. So the standard review that the Coastal Commission would look at until then is the 1992 draft LUP. That being said, the letter that you're referring to actually will be read into the record as part of the public comment. So we just want to clarify that we want to make sure that people understand that because it was received afternoon. In terms of this project's nexus with respect to setting room rates, it's not something that the city has ever done as part of a land use entitlement. And I think Heidi can probably speak more to whether there is the nexus with respect to this project, the CUP, and setting economy room rates. The Coastal Act specifically prohibits or has a provision in there that does not allow the Coastal Commission to set precise room rates. And there's not really a mechanism in the zoning ordinance to have that imposed on a project like this. And certainly Heidi can jump in if she would like.
Heidi?
So I think Jing summed it up very well. The Coastal Commission will be reviewing this project because the city does not have a certified local coastal program right now. Every project in the coastal zone has to go to the Coastal Commission for approval and subject to a coastal development permit. At that time, the Coastal Commission may exercise its authority to work with the low-cost accommodation regulations that are in the Coastal Act. That is not obviously the purview of the Commission at this point because the city does not issue coastal development permits. And in terms of the nexus, as the planning manager mentioned, you have not historically issued any sort of rate cap on hotels in the city. What was before you this evening is to ensure that the lodging use does not have any adverse use impacts on surrounding properties. So the nexus would be difficult to make at this point.
Great, thank you very much. I have one other question which arises from the photos that Commissioner Fresco shared with us, more for information than for anything else. But the proposed project elevation talks about removing non-original steps to the entrance on 2nd Street, which under, from an ADA standpoint, I think is a great idea. But the photos that were shared with us show steps in both of the photos. So I was just wondering if we could get some clarification. Were those steps not there at the original construction and then they were added? And so when you say you're removing non-original steps, they're just going back to 145-year-old elevations? I'm just curious because it was confusing.
Commissioner Landers, I can speak to that. This is Grace Page. So the wrap saloon has evolved quite a bit since its original construction. There were lots of different uses, and the doors, the various iterations of doors and entry into that building, range from 2 double doors to something that looked like a garage door that may have been used to service vehicles at the time. But the stairs or the steps that are there in the picture for current day, those were placed at the time when the hostel was being constructed in the late 80s. So the original to the building. So we know that those aren't historic steps in that regard. But certainly, the work that's being suggested or proposed to drop that floor and to bring the doorway down it's been evaluated by both city consultants as well as an applicant's consultant to ensure that it's being treated with preservation and rehabilitation in mind.
Good, thank you. Commissioner McKinnon.
Commissioner Fresco looking to get an answer there.
Commissioner McKinnon.
Yeah.
Can we
Commissioner McKinnon.
Grace, there are a couple of provisions in there. There's the usual provision of no dancing. Is that just one of those standard things that's been left over from time immemorial? It seems to be a no fun provision inside the hostel. No drinking, no dancing, none of the normal sort of things you'd expect.
It's Methodist.
You changed it.
Yeah, Presbyterian.
It is a carryover of a condition from the existing CUP, and also just given sort of the sensitivities of when you have dense locations with potentially residential uses nearby, if there are outdoor spaces to perhaps look at providing conditions that might address late night noise or activity, and so that those restrictions are really just to look at the outdoor spaces for the hostel and the site.
There's another provision that said no illegal drugs will be consumed. What does that mean? Does that include
that was also a carryover of a condition from the existing CUP.
You'll have to go out to the street for that, Richard.
Yes. They could both come out, couldn't they? So are there conditions that will be sufficient? That's a fairly narrow alley to base construction in, and a very tight site, given especially that it's modular. Now, Jim will know more about this. Modular building is his forte. How will we protect the residents in the building directly across the alley from what will be considerable disruption during that period?
Well, the construction management plan is quite thorough. There are multiple parties involved, the contractor, the multiple departments within the city, and then also just looking at, if there are requests, any type of requests to, work outside the regular construction hours or extended construction requests. Certainly those are looked at case by case. And, granted that if there are residents nearby, those types of issues aren't those types of extensions aren't offered. And so they may be limiting that construction work to just regular construction hours. So, from provisions of noise, hours of construction, and then looking at, ways that we could perhaps look at condensing the amount of time of construction, and just looking at different routes or the approach. Now, I think the applicant and their architect might be able to give you a little more information of what they've sort of looked out and in the forecast of the construction plan. But our understanding is that they're really looking to do the work off the alley.
Yes, but in this particular case, because of the location of the building that fronts Ocean Avenue, which is a large multi-level building, there's a lot of apartments which face directly onto the construction site at that low level. So it will impact more than usual a large number of people. So that's an important question. Let's go back to the room rate issue. And the issue that's being raised is that if this is a normal hostel along a European hosteling model, you stretch from one side where you've got large numbers of people in dormitories right through and can offer really budget level, bare bones accommodation with an ensuite. Is there any way that we can ensure that that doesn't turn into a fairly sophisticated upmarket alternate hotel there on 2nd Street, which is not really a hostel? Or are we simply without legal tools to do that?
I believe in the conditions of approval that there is actually a condition that says that the primary use is a hostel. So if you're looking for more language to be added in terms of, again, reflecting a rate, is that?
No, what I want to reflect is that I want to reflect that it's a hostel and it's a low cost, bare bones accommodation for people to enjoy. And typically there are people who are travelling, but this is one of the only locations in the coastal zone that's affordable. So it be affordable and it doesn't morph into a high-end facility that has a limited number of rooms that costs quite a lot. And absolutely don't want that to happen. I think we all think a hostel's a good idea. The alternative is not. So I have spoken to the city attorney and there she is. Perhaps she has more thoughts on this.
Right. So, as I explained before, we do have concerns about imposing a rate cap directly on the project. If there are concerns that the commission has related to the use, you could use your ability to place conditions on the property under the CUP that would encourage it to remain as it is described, meaning a low-cost hostel with the configuration that it has. And certainly the number of rooms are already locked in under your permit and the project description. So those sorts of things. But if there are other conditions that you feel are appropriate that would encourage the property to remain less luxury and more low cost, then that's certainly something we can discuss you looking into. But we do not believe that a rate cap is appropriate.
And you have explained that, I understand that, but perhaps you might give some thought to what would be an appropriate restriction when we come to that discussion, because absolutely, I think it's a very valuable contribution in that spot if it's a hostel. If it morphs, not so much. They're the limit of my inquiries at the moment. Thank you, Grace.
Commissioner McKinnon, if I can just follow up on that as well. Something to give the commission thought about is I would say historically, we actually haven't had a lot of lodging development in the city really at all, over recent years. I think one way that, from a land use perspective is really looking at amenities, and things like that, that would ensure the kinds of things that are offered. Obviously, it's an existing hostel already. This is an expansion to it, but that is one approach the commission has taken, as opposed to, as Heidi was explaining, the rate cap, which is not recommended at this time.
All right, so you're thinking amenities is the way to go.
Yeah, I'm just sharing that's how the city has approached this issue in the past. Yep.
Thank you.
Commissioner Reese.
Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Reese.
Thank you. A couple of questions. One is on the major modification finding number 2, it talks about no impacts on the neighbor, but we got a comment from one of the neighbors in the building behind that talks about a variety of current concerns. I'm just curious if staff has some comments on how we respond to that and what are kind of valid concerns in there. One of those happens to be, they talk about noise and loading at 3 in the morning back there. I imagine we have rules that prohibit that, but I'd just like to hear your views.
I believe the comments related to the concerned party were more broad about the alley itself. So the alley is a standard size alley. It's 20 feet in width. It's a one-way alley. It heads south. And, I think there are some newer developments that have had some restaurant uses, perhaps, that they were hinting to in their letter, that may be using the alley at hours like 2 or 3 in the morning. That should not be permitted. That's actually against the code sections as it relates to operational standards. So if there is bad behavior going on in the alley, certainly a code enforcement case could be open to look into those matters to address noise at those hours. With this particular project, without having to provide a parking or loading area, there is a specific provision and condition for the project to provide a parking and loading plan. And essentially, it's going to have to work with Public Works and Mobility to ensure that whatever sort of loading operations that the hostel does need would be worked through a bigger overall plan of how does that alley function, and then maybe there are some hours that are more appropriate to load from the street on 2nd Street. So with our downtown, we're looking at more of these parking and loading plans to help coordinate basically infill projects.
Okay, I don't really see her focus too much on the alley. It's more about noise. And I see some, anyways, thank you for that response. I'll have other comments for the commission later on that. Then my second question was already asked, which was about the historic stairs, quote unquote, being removed or not being historic stairs. So I look to hear more from that as the discussion goes on. And then the final one is on the CEQA analysis. I see the backup for the class 31, which is the historic report. I'm just curious if there's backup for the class 32, their studies.
Hi, this is Rachel. Hi, I can answer that. No, there was not a backup for the class 31 because it was pretty self-explanatory. But if the desire is to provide backup, we could certainly do that.
I was talking about the class 32.
Oh, the class 32? Yes, I mean, the backup itself is really the historic report. That really lays out all of the project's consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards.
Okay, but hold on a second. My understanding is the class 31 relates to historic and class 32 is an urban infill.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I got that mixed up. Yeah, for the class 31, we did not because it was pretty self-explanatory. It's within an existing developed parcel. And so, we don't normally provide the backup for that, but we can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions for right now.
Okay, I have several questions of staff. The first one is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this hostel's been in operation for about 30 years, correct? 1990?
That's correct.
Yes. Have there been any violations of city codes or the CUP during that period? Hello?
So the records in which are available from the software that I have available, or it does not show specifically if there are violations related to a CUP.
What about the noise ordinance? I just want to make sure
there was a specific noise complaint.
Yes.
I would have to look further into.
Okay. I just wanted to, I mean, my sense is they're a pretty good neighbor, but I just wanted that confirmed. My understanding also is that this new construction will involve creation of hotel rooms that are not the dormitory model, but instead more suitable for family occupancy. Is that correct?
The rooms are labeled with both family room and dorm room. These are essentially rooms that have a bathroom, whereas maybe a more traditional idea of a dorm room would be like a larger room with many beds and then a bathroom that's accessible with many stalls.
So conceivably, the room rate for these larger family units would be higher than sleeping on a bunk in a dormitory. You don't have to answer. I mean, that's obvious.
Right. The room rates, I think the question could be for more appropriate for the applicant to respond on how they do that pricing. But a quick look at our records, there does not appear to be any noise complaints related with the hostel.
And that's over a course of 30 years. The other question I have, from what I understand, when the hostel was built 30 years ago, the setback was 14 feet in the rear. Is that correct? So basically, the existing footprint is a 14-foot setback.
The existing footprint of the building?
In the rear, and then the DCP changed it to 16 feet, but the existing footprint is probably 14 feet, correct?
Let me clarify. So there were no setbacks, rear setbacks.
Oh, interesting.
So the downtown community plan looked to establish a rear setback of 2 feet from the rear property line with a clearance dimension of 16 feet in height. So it's a two-dimensional setback, 2 feet plus 16 going vertical. The new portion of the building can get the 2 feet from the rear property line. It just cannot provide the full clearance of 16.
I understand. Great. Thank you. And then finally, the parking situation, I mean, it's basically exempt from parking requirements, auto parking requirements downtown because it's in a parking district. And it also has a historic resource on site, correct?
Right. There's the provision for not having to provide for parking. And, that's one of the incentives for preservation efforts in the downtown, as well as other parts of the city.
And then to reconfirm, this will go to the Landmarks Commission, not the ARB, right? Those for Certificate of Appropriateness.
That's correct.
Landmarks Commission. So they will do the design review.
Landmarks Commission will be the design review entity, correct?
Thank you. That is all my questions. So we are now ready for the applicant. I'm going to give them a few minutes to set up their presentation. Staff, do we have any, I want to say chits, but I guess it's emails on the project?
Yes, we have 2 letters received this afternoon.
I'm sorry?
We have 2 letters that were received this afternoon.
Why don't we read those now while they're setting up?
Okay. Okay, the first letter is my audio okay? Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Having issues. It's from Danielle Wilson.
It's so.
What was that?
The audio is so on my end. It's not totally clear.
Is she talking?
Okay, let me try something really quick.
Okay. Actually, while you're figuring that out, I think we can go to the applicant. They seem to be ready. Aaron and Gwen, you have 15 minutes to present, and then we will have questions of you. Would you identify yourself, please?
Certainly, this is Aaron Chafee. Just to check, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Good evening, commissioners. We appreciate your time today as we seek approval for the development and or expansion of our hostel at 1436 2nd Street. I am Aaron Chafee, Vice President with Hosteling International USA. I'm an 18-year staff member of this 501c3 nonprofit, and in that role, I'm representing the applicant and the property owner. I also have two local members of our project team joining this evening. I'm guessing the majority of you already know architect Gwen Pugh and legal counsel Ken Kutcher. They will both be making project remarks this evening. I'd like to also mention that during the Q&A, we are happy, as the applicant, to respond to questions around construction. It's noise, a major reason why we're using modular. The concerns around going upmarket. We are a nonprofit, and I would love to address that. And then I know Gwen will be addressing the stairs and the concerns that we have on those, and please know that we're preservationists within the organization. To reduce any naming confusion at the start, Hostel International USA is the trade name for American Youth Hostels. So we are one and the same. One of us might also use High USA or AYH, as we use those abbreviations. Hostel goes by High Santa Monica Hostel and is owned and operated by Hostel International USA. And it will remain that way for years and years and years, being run by this nonprofit. High USA is over 85 years old and is focused across the country on providing affordable lodging access to share the diversity of people, places, and cultures in the U.S. Belief is that through this exploration, we can help to break down cultural barriers and lead to a more tolerant world and hopefully a more peaceful one too. For those many years, we found that the affordable stay option of a hostel and the inherent community atmosphere, both between guests and with local area residents, the perfect environment for exploration and interpersonal exchange when experiencing a new location. As you will note from the slide on your screen, we have the benefit of a tremendous location in Santa Monica. With the ocean on one side and the promenade on the other, amenities all around us, and numerous transportation options, which include those that are more sustainable. In the 1980s, a group of strong-minded volunteers and staff set out to develop the largest purpose-built hostel in the United States, while also providing historic preservation stewardship. And they did that right in Santa Monica, with the current HI Santa Monica Hostel and the RAP. Our successful efforts with the hostel have allowed for many wins. California Coastal Act, City of Santa Monica, and our own organization. We have our own mission gains and our own mission impact. We help address the ever-challenged affordable access to the coast, and specifically with the rates that are in Santa Monica. This is through our lower cost visitor accommodations. We preserve the first landmark structure. We provide a community amenity through the sharing of the RAP with community groups for their use. We increase the spectrum of visitors to Santa Monica. So the wins continue beyond that. But just for a little highlight, we have about 30,000 visitors each year. That's 80,000 overnights. We run about 90% annual overnight occupancy, reason for the expansion. 6,000 plus visitors and community program participants each year in our nonprofit programming. We're Green Globe certified, and the project is a model of the possibilities between new construction and historic preservation. As the Commission report shares, we are seeking development approval for an expansion that will include 40 new lower-cost guest rooms and programming element improvements for the historic RAP. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Gwen as he walks through the architectural elements, and then Ken will close with a few remarks.
So are you seeing the presentation? Because I'm not seeing it on the screen here.
Gwen, we can't hear you.
Well, I've got my sound on.
Okay, that's better.
Okay.
We're not seeing your presentation, though.
That's better.
Do you have the presentation up, Aaron?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, gang. Hold on.
We don't have it.
Oh, here we go. Let's try one more time here.
I'm not seeing it yet.
Any
There we
luck?
go. No, that's it. That's looking good.
Okay. You missed
So,
2 slides, everyone. Sorry, but we'll save time.
So can you hear me at this point? Everybody, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Very good. So I'll try and move through this fairly quickly. As you can see, the upper rendering is the view from the alley, and in the middle of the building there is a U-shaped building. We're essentially making this into a courtyard building by enclosing the back end of the building through there. Next. One of the things is that from 2nd Street and from the effect of the Wrap Saloon, basically you won't see the addition. So the addition is going to be 5 stories in total height, whereas the existing building is 4 stories. But the front of the building will, in essence, hide anything that's from the back, from the street level. Next. The modular units themselves will be lifted into place. The time period for erection of the modular units, the 5 stories, is of the order of about 5 days from setup to removal of the setup and for stacking all of the units. So it's a very short period of time. The ground floor will, in fact, be hand-built, so we create a podium, but everything above that is the modular units that stack up. And there's basically 6 modular units that are 2 rooms. Those rooms are still the same, whether they have multiple bunk beds in them or whether they're family oriented. And that's really the only difference, is that families can occupy 1 room as a family, but otherwise the activity and the capacity of the rooms is all the same, whether they're bunk rooms or hotel, or what's called hotel, which is really family rooms. Next. Next.
When you want the existing alley conditions, or the next one after that?
I'm seeing still the floor plan. So are we on the alleys there?
Yeah, we're on the alleys now.
Okay, for some reason it's not turning over on mine. So I will look at it as I go along here. So what we have is the existing alley conditions. Next, as you can see, most of the buildings butt up right up to the edge of the alley. Next.
Modification perspective, Gwen?
Yeah, that's the perspective. So that we're putting in there. Keep going. Next one. And so this is where the modification is that we're looking for, is that area in purple. All of the areas that are in the pink essentially comply because they're either existing or they are new, but they're set back the 2 feet. So the availability to get to the trash and service the trash and the area where the transformer will all be set back the 2 feet. And it's really so that we can put in the modules and service the transformer in that area. Over 75% of this alley is right at the edge of the alley, of the property lines. So the extra 2 feet for 16 feet in height would be serving very little use given the existing conditions. Next.
Or an exterior material?
The exterior materials, we're essentially using vertical square corrugated gray panels to skin the modules themselves, and then highlighting it with essentially a paler blue, a darker blue, and a beige, and all of the windows and the like would be a dark gray. Next.
existing ramp?
So you can see on the left-hand side, this is a historic property, and as you can see, one of the iterations of it was that it had access directly, even with the street, and did not have any steps in the front. So various modifications have occurred to this building through time, and so there's no historical significance to the existing steps. Although they may be similar to what was existing at some particular time, but are not in and of themselves historic. One of the reasons that we're looking to, let's go next slide.
Interior floor plan.
As you can see on the interior floor plan, on the right-hand side, there's the ramp and the stairs going up. Can't quite see the bottom of it in this, but it takes up a considerable amount of room and makes access into the interior very difficult, because it either comes from inside, or you have to go up inside the hostel, or otherwise you have to go up steps. The steps themselves intrude into the sidewalk. This would be ADA accessible from both inside the hostel and from the exterior. It would facilitate community use as well as interior use by the hostel for uses if we could lower the floor. And it would also make this interior space more graceful, because currently it has a relatively low ceiling. Next. So one of the ways in which we've looked at that is what would it look like if we removed it? And so you can see here options on the upper level are with the steps in existence, and how it would look if those steps were removed. Next. And so that's how the final, how it would look finally in the front of the building. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ken.
Thank you, Gwen. Commissioners, appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about this project, which is an expansion of obviously an affordable lodging facility within the downtown, within the Coastal Commission, exactly a desirable type of use that the city would rarely see, and yet it's been here for 30 years. To address some of the comments or questions that were raised about ensuring affordable room rates, on the one hand, I have to say that the state legislature has stepped in and said that there's a prohibition against commercial rent control law. So on the one hand, that's disappointing news perhaps for the commissioners. On the other, I'd like to let the commission know, on the other hand, that there's a memorandum of agreement that's been recorded with the city of Santa Monica that was granted at the time the hostel in the 2000 time frame during one of their prior expansions received funds from the affordable lodging mitigation fee. And condition number 2 of this memorandum of agreement says the real property shall be used for affordable lodging for the reasonable lifetime of the improvements constructed with the grant funds, or 20 years, whichever time period is longer. So life of the improvements. So I think that you are protected by a grant agreement that was recorded in 2000 to ensure affordability. In addition, you've got an applicant and owner that builds and operates these facilities nationwide and has operated this facility for 30 some years. As Gwen mentioned, there will be prefabricated units that are used, and that will expedite construction, that will minimize impacts to the residents. It also enable the hostel to largely continue in operation during construction. And so that should reduce, if not eliminate, some of the disruption that you normally find with construction. They only need to be assembled here, and the construction on the first floor needs to occur. As to the wrap saloon, as has been mentioned, the current steps were constructed in the late 80s. Yes, there were steps there at some time in the early 1900s. I don't know whether they were steps in 1875. Nobody has a picture of that. The Landmarks Commission will scrutinize that and the door carefully through a certificate of appropriateness process. If the commission chooses to, weigh in and give direction to pay particular attention to those features, that's certainly something that the commission has done in the past. The Landmarks Commission won't overlook those regardless, but we certainly have no objection to something to that effect. We
just want to note that's 15 minutes.
Thank you. Happy to conclude at that point, and any of us will be available to answer questions.
No, I think before we go to the commission, let's hear the two public comments. Alyssa?
Okay. Can you guys hear me this time around?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. First letter is from Danielle Wilson. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Danielle Wilson, and I am speaking on behalf of Unite Here Local 11, the Hotel Workers Union. Our union fights to ensure that working families have equal access to the coast. We believe hostels can help to accomplish this goal. However, the project before you tonight proposes what are essentially hotel rooms, and for this reason, we object to the proposed entitlements. Some of you know about the storied tale of Shore Hotel, just blocks from the proposed project before you tonight. Shore was originally approved as low to moderate cost hotel by this body, the council, and the California Coastal Commission. Shore subsequently developed a luxury hotel, demolishing 2 existing affordable lodging facilities in the process. For 5 years, we fought alongside other coastal access advocates to ensure that Santa Monica would get those rooms back. According to the California Coastal Commission, between 1990 and 2018, Santa Monica lost nearly half of its lower cost overnight accommodations. One of the central questions throughout the debate over Shore Hotel was how to best define lower cost, a question that has eluded the Coastal Commission for many years. One conclusion the Commission has reached, however, is that hotels, RV parks, and campgrounds tend to be inherently lower cost. In fact, the existing Santa Monica hostel itself was built through the Commission's collection of mitigation fees for lower cost accommodations across the state. The proposal before you, however, proposes private rooms with ensuite bathrooms, essentially hotel rooms, that would comprise nearly 30% of the entire hostel if approved. The City of Santa Monica maintains a distinction between hotel rooms and hostel rooms. Municipal Code Chapter 4.67 states that a hotel does not include a hostel, which is a lodging facility primarily characterized by dormitory-style accommodations, shared bathrooms, and reservations of beds rather than rooms. Private rooms at hostels are not inherently affordable. For example, at the Freehand in downtown LA, while dorm beds can be as little as $50, a private room could be over $200 even before fees. Moreover, according to a 2017 analysis by the city, rooms at the Santa Monica hostel could already range from $126 to $199 on average. The staff report admits that the existing hostel is one of the few affordable lodging options in the downtown, and we agree. The proposed expansion should be limited to actual hostel rooms and nothing more. In order to be consistent with the various goals and policies in the Downtown Community Plan and the LUCE that pertain to affordable overnight lodging options, the Planning Commission should only approve truly affordable accommodations. The Planning Commission could also ensure that the hostel rooms remain affordable by conditioning the development so that prices do not exceed a level that puts them out of reach of many Californians. The LUP for the LCP describes hotel rooms that are under $140 as economy rooms, its second lowest classification. The city could require that the hostel's private rooms prices do not exceed $140 in 2018 dollars adjusted for inflation. The city of Santa Monica cares deeply about ensuring coastal access for all, which is especially difficult in a city that naturally incentivizes the development of luxury overnight accommodations. The Planning Commission has an opportunity to ensure that the proposed project remains affordable by approving an expansion that includes hostel rooms only, which will also set good precedent for future similar proposals. Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you, Melissa. There's a second one too, right?
Yes. And this is from Ellis Raskin. Dear Chair Lambert and Honorable Commissioners, I am writing to you tonight as Chair of the Santa Monica Alliance for the Future to urge you to deny the requested entitlements for the proposed project at 1436 2nd Street. As we will show, the project will not achieve consistency with General Plan and Coastal Act requirements that mandate the preservation of low-cost visitor-serving visitor accommodations. The project will essentially create private hotel rooms that can be rented at high costs rather than traditional shared hostel accommodations. And to make matters worse, there are no conditions of approval that ensure the project will remain affordable in the future. By way of background, the hostel at 1436 2nd Street was constructed because the Coastal Commission required American Youth Hostels Incorporated to contribute $365,000 to build low-cost coastal accommodations. These were mitigation impact fees for high-cost hotel accommodations that were approved in Marina del Rey in 1979. The coastal development permits numbers A4979 and A20729. Now, over 4 decades later, American Youth Hostels will abdicate its responsibility to provide low-cost accommodations. Under the proposal before you tonight, it will build new private suites with private washrooms, which can be rented at a much higher cost than traditional shared hostel accommodations. In other words, this project will increase the cost of coastal visitor-serving accommodations in Santa Monica. This new proposal is inconsistent with DCP policy LU 3.3, which requires the city to strive to achieve the goals of the State Coastal Act in regard to low-cost visitor accommodations. As you know, general plan consistency is required for CUPs and major modifications. Furthermore, general plan inconsistencies are a significant environmental effect, and the Class 31 and Class 32 CEQA exemptions cannot be approved. See CEQA guidelines, section 15300.2c. At the very least, the project approvals should include conditions that mandate overnight accommodations at 1436 2nd Street be provided at economy rates as defined by the city's 2018 Coastal Land Use Plan. See LUP page 55, defining economy rooms as costing $105 to $140 per night. Respectfully submitted, Ellis Raskin.
Thank you.
And let me see. We actually have another letter that just came in.
Okay.
Okay. This is from Jamie Morris. Jamie writes, we're residents of 1431 Ocean Avenue with my apartment on the 3rd floor facing the alley/hostel. We do have concerns of the noise from construction, especially since many of us are now working from home in the building and expect to continue to do so for quite some time, if not permanently. The past 2 days, we had to listen to jackhammers while trying to work while other work was being done in the alley. As for the noise ordinance regarding live music, we do not support not allowing this outdoors. The hostel does sometimes have live music and or karaoke indoors, and they do this with windows open, so it can be quite noisy. It would likely be worse if this was outside. Our biggest concern is the loss of sunlight and sky view that those of us on the lower floors of our building would lose. Here's a view from our window currently, and they submitted a photo. With the addition, we would lose all of the sky and instead be looking directly at a wall with windows into the hostel. Submitted by Jamie and Yulia Morris.
Thank you. I'm going to give the applicant. Okay, is there more?
One moment, one more may have just come in.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay, this is an additional submittal from Ellis Raskin in addition to what I read previously. It reads, FYI, there is a nexus between 1, limiting or capping the cost of visitor serving accommodations, and 2, ensuring the public is not burdened by inconsistencies with DCP policy LU 3.3 requiring low-cost visitor serving facilities. Furthermore, setting a rate cap is not necessarily an exaction under Nolan versus California Coastal Commission 1987, 483 U.S. 825, and Dolan versus the City of Teagard, 512 U.S. 374 Sea Beach and Bluff Conservancy versus the City of Solana Beach. The unconstitutional conditions doctrine applies only where the condition at issue constitutes an exaction in the form of either the conveyance of a property interest or the payment of money. The doctrine does not apply where the government simply restricts the use of property without demanding an exaction. And that is the end.
Okay, thank you. Is that it? I'm going to give the applicant 5 minutes. What? I'm sorry. Okay.
We're just confirming that that's the end.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to give the applicant 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you. I'll start, and I might ask Ken to wrap in here a little bit. Let me begin by, again, reiterating that we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We've been doing this for 85 years with our goal of providing affordable access throughout the country. That is what we do, and that is our goal, and that's what we're going to stay with. We are not the Free Hand in downtown LA, which was owned by the Seidel Group, a for-profit entity, and it was purchased by Generator, another for-profit entity. So the comparison's not quite the same. I think the key where this confusion, and I feel bad about it because this is the same concerns that are being addressed are our exact concerns, that we want to provide access, underserved populations, lower income populations, so they can explore the country and locations, understand people, places, and cultures. So it's key to us that we stay true to that. The rooms in this situation, as staff has mentioned, were originally a mixture of dorms and privates. The footprint is exactly the same for both, so that as needed, they can be converted from a 4-bedded dorm to what we're calling a family room, and I'll explain that in a minute. Because of COVID, just very recently in the last month or so, I've asked the architect to just focus on private family rooms right now in the space, knowing that as we come out of COVID, we can come back to the dorm use. But there's lots of concerns about congregate living with COVID, so I wanted to be mindful of that, or organizational. That is the reason why the focus on just private en suites, but it's the same footprint for a four-bedded dorm room that's en suite. One of the key reasons for that is for many years, the California Coastal Commission has been concerned about hostels not providing access to families. So we were adamant on this project that we would build family rooms so that families could have affordable access to the coast and affordable access to the coast in Santa Monica. So these rooms are a combination of a queen side bed, that will sound a little bit like a hotel room, and then a bunk bed. So yes, it's a larger room, or larger setup of sleeping accommodations, but we're adamant that we wanted families to be able to stay with us. Ken has already shared with you that we have used previous mitigation funding for the project. Our expectation is both to request that mitigation funding from the City of Santa Monica and from the California Coastal Commission, and there will be restrictions on the rates that can be applied through the hostel based upon that. And again, this is our core. We may be delisted as a developer, but we're a nonprofit. This is our core about what we want to do is provide affordable access. So that's the key element on this affordability item. I think Ken touched upon the noise concerns during construction. Everything other than that podium built off site, east of LA, they come in about 7 days. There will be some noise those 7 days. The modular units are put together, kind of like Lego pieces. So we're really focused on that because we want to stay operational during that time period so we can pay our bills. So I hope that helps address some of the questions from the public. And again, we're right there with the concerns. We're totally aligned.
Thank you very
much.
If
I could just dovetail on that, as Grace mentioned, condition number 4, the introduction to criterias A, B, C, and D indicates that the primary use of the premises shall be as a hostel. So that might provide some additional assurance and comfort for the commissioners.
Is there a legal definition of hostel?
I provided what I know to be a hostel, but I think staff may want to answer that question themselves.
Now, let me just do an aside right here. Does our code actually have a definition of hostel, or the state code?
The code does not. So under the zoning ordinance, hostel is under the lodging land use classification, which includes hotels, motels, rooming houses, all kinds of like transient stay facilities. So it does not distinguish between a hotel and a hostel. It's just all under one classification.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay. Are you?
Comment to regarding noise and light and air. The building that's on Ocean Avenue is set back from the alley well over 20 feet. I think it's more like 30 feet. So in fact, they'll be close to between 40 and 50 feet between the wall of their building and the hostel. In terms of sound and noise, the community dining room will be facing on the courtyard, and basically there'll be 5 stories sheltering the adjoining buildings from any noise that might occur during some activities that occur. And mostly that's an infrequent occurrence that those kinds of things occur, but it'll be well sheltered.
Thank you. Okay. So we're going to start with questions of the applicant, starting with Commissioner Fonda Bernardi. Do you have any?
I do. A couple of questions, 3 or 4 actually. One is right now there's 4 or 5 parking spaces in the back, and those vanish. Where will those cars go in the model that's being proposed?
Yeah, there is the allowance, as Steph explained, that we were able, the parking spots were not required in the original development. We just happened to have theirs, and then continuing with that without that requirement, so we could do this expansion. Those parking spots were for staff, and not for guests. And we will be following transportation demand management plan on working with our staff on providing the subsidies to help them on using more sustainable versions of transportation versus the cars.
And we'll be integrating bicycle parking within the facility as well.
Okay. So right now, if someone has some, okay. Right now, if you were to have built this building, what are your current rates for dorms, and what would the dorms be in this new addition in the Lego units, basically?
Sure. So rates range depending upon the time of year, some from about $33 to $50 for a dorm bed. And these 4-bedded dorm ensuite, that is what folks are really highly demanding right now. Those would probably have a little higher range, and so we'd probably be seeing ranges that would go from $39 and up to $59 for those rooms as a dorm consideration. And we're fully expecting, in coordination with the Coastal Commission, is also, as I mentioned, because of our seeking for funding, grant funding, to control the rates on the private rooms in that area. I think average daily rate is roughly between $335, $385 a night in Santa Monica. And we would be considerably below that. I think $105 is a stretch to figure out how to be sustainable operationally at that level, but I think we can definitely find a version where it's still remaining affordable for the larger family private rooms.
Okay. This is a question actually for Ken or the city attorney. Can you refer to a memorandum of understanding that defines certain rates? And I'd like to hear from the city attorney if, in fact, or it didn't define certain rates, it defined a category, I guess.
Correct.
If that memorandum of understanding still protects this portion of the project.
Right. So my understanding is that the memorandum of understanding relates to the portion that was subject to the grant and would not cover the new construction. But it's also my understanding, and this is where Mr. Kutcher may want to weigh in, that they would be seeking additional funds, which if they obtain those funds, would be subject to a similar memorandum of understanding.
Yeah, and I can reinforce that by the fact that I've been corresponding with Community Economic Development for months now to ask them to issue an RFP for the funds that they have collected for affordable lodging facilities so that we could apply for that grant.
And I guess this is a question for Aaron. If you were to get that grant, would you accept the same constraints that were in the original memorandum of understanding?
Yeah, with the same methodology consideration for just pricing to current time period. Yeah, that's the full expectation. But whether it's looking at it as inflationary evaluation or then also looking at what's happened in overall lodging in Santa Monica and then placing where is that for lower moderate pricing of a room, and so that we're setting that. And similar to in the past, and then also suggesting that increases obviously through inflation on an annual basis or probably an annual basis.
Okay, last question, and you know this one's coming up. It's regarding solar collectors. First of all, I'd like to point out this is a very difficult site to create any kind of solar energy because you have this giant sunscreen called a 12-story building on the southwest side, which is the worst side for solar collectors. So that's an example of what we're trying to avoid. In this case, it's pre-existing condition in your project, but I like to generalize over the city. The more we raise the height of our buildings, the more we have buildings that kill other buildings' ability to reach net zero or even try to move in that direction. Nonetheless, it seems that there were some solar collectors provided. They were on the west side of the roof, and the question is, was, if that's all you could provide, why were they put on that side as opposed to the east side of the roof, where they get a little more sun around the big building? And if they were to stay there, could you cover the whole roof from east to west where those collectors are with solar collectors? Maybe Gwen can weigh in on that.
Well, I think part of it is that the existing roof that's on the easterly side is it's got a lot of equipment in it. It's got an equipment hutch. So there's very little room on the easterly side of the building currently to be able to put photovoltaics. Probably the best location would be the southwesterly, but even then, there's limitations just by the geography and the geometry of what's going on. I'm very much in accordance with where you're coming from in terms of maximizing it, but given that this is a 5-story building, we're not going to be able to get to net zero with photovoltaics. We can probably do some areas like hallways.
And get to net zero above 3 stories. But the other side of this question is, what's the wattage that you can get from the collectors you have, given the circumstances that you're working with, such a difficult site?
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, but I would want to maximize it for sure.
Well, it would be good in the future. We're trying to get to net zero or as close as we can. We need to have those things kind of blocked down, built into the projects from day one, instead of just left sort of floating to the good graces of the budget or the developer or whoever knows what else. So I would like to get those facts more on the ground and tied up in the future. That's all my questions.
Good point.
You're muted, Nina.
All right. I would like to know how high off the ground the raised floor in the wrap saloon is.
I'm not, I know that we've been through the process because we've been looking at the ramps and everything. It's something of the order of between 24 and 30 inches, I believe. Aaron, do you know specifically what it is?
Yeah, I don't know specifically. I'd say it's closer to the 24, just with how many risers are kind of on the current steps that are there. So, but probably in the 24-inch range.
Okay. And my other question, in your presentation, you have a photograph, which I think is from the piano store. Well, it would have to be from the piano store era of the building. Where's that photo from? Do you know?
I don't offhand. No. That was that David Kaplan had got. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to save all my comments for comments.
Okay. Commissioner Landris.
Okay. First of all, thank you. So I want to ask a series of questions related to affordability and purpose in the hopes that we can get to some clarifications about intent and the future of the project. And I also just want to get some clarity. So forgive me if these sound like, are you aware? But here's where we're going to go. So I'm going to start by start in the municipal code. And I just want to ask the applicant to confirm their awareness that while a hostel is not defined in the zoning ordinance, it is defined in the Hotel Worker Protection Ordinance. And in fact, if the dormitory style accommodations and shared bathrooms go away and reservations of beds rather than rooms go away as a primary characterization, while you might still be a lodging as a under the land use codes, you would potentially be subject to hotel worker protection codes. So I just want to make sure that you are aware of all that.
I appreciate the information. So, and that is new context for me. Again, just real quick, even the expansion, our original plan was the majority of that space was dormitories.
Right.
But addressing, but this has just been near-term change for COVID, not knowing how long COVID's going to stick around, or demand or opinion about shared spaces. So, but yeah, I just wanted to re-emphasize that our view is what we're hoping to do is the majority of that space is dorms, but addressing that families also want affordable accommodations, trying to provide these families.
Right, and I absolutely support providing affordable accommodations to families. Having stayed in hostels, having stayed in hostel-like environments with kids, but also preferring, affordable accommodations that are family-oriented. So I get that. I want to clarify a few things and then see if we can get to a resolution. My second question has to do with the low income lodging, the affordable lodging mitigation fee, and in fact the the mitigation fee that comes from the conversion of low income rooms to higher income rooms. So could you explain to us, you're a beneficiary of those in lieu fees, I believe. And so you're well aware of what you have to do to be eligible for those fees. Can you clarify that to us, and then also confirm your understanding that if you were to raise the rates on some of these hotel rooms, not only would you be ineligible for the fees, you could conceivably become a fee payer as opposed to a fee beneficiary. So can you talk us through that a little bit?
Sure, Commissioner. So on development in the coastal zone, which we are in on this project, the development of a lodging that is above moderate rates is either required to figure out how they add moderate rate or lower cost accommodations in the project, potentially near the project, although nobody's really done that, or pay a mitigation fee. Mitigation fee can either go, depending upon the structure, can go to the coastal commission, and to make things complicated, they move it to the conservancy for holding. Or at times, it also can, some of those fees can come to a local area such as the city of Santa Monica. Then you have to provide access to it. You're needing to make a commitment pretty much into perpetuity that you're going to operate at a lower cost fees. And so the only folks that really access these fees are state parks and American youth hostels up and down the coast in California. Because no for-profit entity can put the restriction that they will operate at affordable costs into perpetuity. Whereas because that is within our mission, then we can make that commitment and stick to it. So I hope that helps.
No, that's very helpful. And so let's now turn to your status as a nonprofit. You're a 501c3 nonprofit. As you pointed out, the applicant and the property owner are all one entity in a variety of DBAs. And what I have noticed in I reviewed your 3 years of your 990 forms, and what I observed is that when people pay for your hotel room, your hostel rooms, that revenue is booked as program service revenue by Hosteling International USA, as I understand it, which means that it's for you, from the perspective of a nonprofit, it is functionally the same thing as me paying entry to a museum, paying a fee to enter a museum, for me paying, any use fee if I were to join the, a nonprofit organization and pay a use fee, not as a membership, but that's you have separate income for membership. So given that you are treating your hostel rooms and your bookings and your beds as program service revenue, how does that act to cap the rates that you're setting? Do you engage? I recognize that you're going to charge differently for a hostel in Santa Monica, California than you might for one in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But given that you're a nonprofit, you're not able to take profits out of the business for anybody's benefit privately. And you are booking these not as UBIT, not as unrelated business income, but as direct program service revenue in service of your mission. How are you setting rates?
So we do, like the hotel industry, do revenue management and yielding. So we do similar approaches to that in the sense of looking to, as you mentioned, the market, and to a certain extent, what the market will bear. We then go through an exercise of capping rates. The cap is different in each location that we're. And so that is what's making sure that our manager does not kind of creep over the top because it's August in Santa Monica, although we're allowing that cap to go up a little bit in August. But yeah, we are a fee-for-service structure. We build our program and our mission around the hostel stay experience at the hostel, and those fees are there. At times, that some of our larger urban hostels, such as Santa Monica, we're hoping for some surplus from those that will help fund smaller hostels up and down the coast. We have other locations up and down the coast, and some of them are in wonderful lighthouses and things like that. And when they're smaller and because of staffing costs, we can't cover the costs with those. So we do hope for some of the larger regional hostels to kind of help assist in those program deliveries. I don't know if that helped.
It does. So where I'm going is, I really do respect the concerns that have been raised that we not kind of slip into rate rises or moving out of low affordability. I also recognize the difference between a nonprofit operator and a for-profit operator. And I think one of the things that we would be concerned about, since you're aware of what happens to you if you change your rate treatment, because it will affect, or your room allocation, I think for a land use decision, we would want to really make sure that our project description locks in this kind of a use, so that in the event of a sale down the line, there would be some protections. So my question is there language that you would be willing to add to the project description voluntarily that would describe the intent here, that the use is consistent with your nonprofit mission? We do need to be aware that these are tax exempt dollars that are financing this work, and would also confirm your intent that this be consistent with that affordability mission on an indefinite basis. That would provide some assurances with respect to this particular land use.
Let me respond, then I'll have counsel tell me that I couldn't respond. So that's a definite. Can I come up with that language right now, this evening?
Yeah, we would need to hear it so that we can vote it in.
Okay, so that's
your voluntary language. So
yeah, that will be the complication.
You'd be volunteering it.
Ken can help.
Basically, what you're asking for is some kind of deed restriction that restricts the hostel use to this property. Is that what you're asking for?
Well, essentially, this is a land trust. I mean, what we're looking at is, this is a nonprofit organization. This is not a land trust for affordable housing. This is a land trust for affordable lodging. And as long as it's within the land trust concept.
What do you mean? I don't understand. Where is the land trust?
It's by a nonprofit. It's owned by and operated by.
That's not the same as a land trust. A nonprofit owns the property.
Wait, this is discussion. This is discussion for commissioners later. Let's try to.
I'm asking a question of the applicant and of Sean's intent.
My intent is that the applicant volunteer a clarification in the project description of its intended use of the improvement and its intended approach to rate setting that will make it perfectly clear that if the commission approves this tonight, that is the project that the commission has approved. And so if in the future, I'll go straight to where I'm going. if in the future Hosteling International USA makes a determination that it wants to remove this property from its portfolio, sell it to somebody else, or lease it out for operations to somebody else, that that description is governing the use of the land, and that if somebody then comes along and starts messing with the rooms, messing with the rates,
I got it. You answered my question.
we have something to land on. And I believe that having consulted with the city attorney and having discussed this with Mr. Kutcher, and with the folks and with Unite Here, I mean, I think we can't go to rate setting, I'm told by the city attorney, but we can lock ourselves into a descriptive.
I got it. I understand. Sorry I interrupted. Is that it?
That's it. That's my question.
Thank you. Commissioner McKinnon.
Did we get an answer to that question?
I think so.
No, but they were going to give us language. So do we have?
They're going to come back with language to see if it's what Sean is saying.
Mr. Kutcher, will we get language before we vote?
Sure, I'll work offline with Aaron.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just, as a warning, I'm likely needing board authority as the nonprofit entity here with the national board to bind us to this level. If it provides some flexibility, I think Ken and I can do that offline. I'm just a little concerned, depending upon the language, how this encumbers the property. I probably am needing board authority on this. And so the language could say pending approval of the IH board or something. I don't know, but I'm signaling that I wouldn't necessarily, I don't think, have that authority at this point.
So why don't you have a chat to your lawyer and let's see where we get to by the end of the evening.
Okay, that sounds good.
Chair Lambert, could I suggest that Commissioner Reese goes before me?
Commissioner Reese.
I don't really have any questions. I have more concerns I'd like to bring up with the commission if we could try to get ourselves through questions.
McKinnon, you have questions?
I do have some questions. So the question to the applicant, I'm still unclear. What if tonight I went and knocked on your door, what would the room rate be for the hotel room or whatever we call that room?
It would range from $33 to, it could be to $59. And it would depend if it's a weeknight or weekend.
No. So tonight is a Wednesday night. If your hostel was operative with the improvements done, if I went there, what would the cost of a room in the dormitory be? What would the cost of the hotel room be?
So we are closed right now because of COVID, but I will theoretically.
I'm completely aware of that. I'm asking a hypothetical question. We're finished. I turn up at the front door and I say, I'd like a bed here tonight. What's the cost of the bed? And if I then said, hey, I actually want the room with the ensuite, what's that cost likely to be?
Yeah. So the dorm room, because we're going into 4th of July weekend. So I'll theoretically just say we would probably be close to $59 for the dorm room. I'm going into the 4th of July weekend. And the private room, that is yet to be worked out what those private rooms would be. I would say that those are ranging in the $159 at this time of year. Once we're going into July 4th, $159 to $199 is where we would be believing it would be, unless through conversations that becomes more capped. But that,
okay.
Yeah.
So a bed in a multi-bed dormitory, shared facilities, $59 tonight. Cost of a room with a queen bed and 2 bunk beds, roughly triple that, $159 to $199. What would it be in February, which is the lowest time of the year in Santa Monica?
It'd be probably closer to $33 for the dorm room, $33 to $39. and the private room would probably be in the 129, 139 range. Now that said, yeah, there's nobody down at that level in Santa Monica right now, but yeah, so it would be around 129 to 130.
Yes, I just was not clear through everything you'd said before what the actual room rates were likely to be. So you're not averse to some discussion about restriction on what you're likely to charge to maintain what we all want, which is people who have low incomes being able to access these rooms. That's my concern.
Yeah, so my one concern, and when I'm humming a little bit here, is our preference is to be in this project is to have a pilot program that is promoting access to the coast for underserved markets in California for those at need. Because we don't have a screening process when somebody books into us, we're not able to evaluate at need or not at need. What we're really trying to do is not necessarily completely cap the rate across the board, but look for how can we provide a discount to populations that don't have the opportunity, either because they're inland or because of their income levels, no matter where they're at, specific to California residents. And this applies somewhat to the work that both the Conservancy, the Coastal Conservancy, and the Coastal Commission is working on in environmental justice, is making sure that we can accomplish that. But just by capping a rate for, and I apologize for stating this, but for a rich European coming over here on their gap year, when we're a nonprofit looking to fund other programs, we happen to got travel scholarships and things like that. That's just not the approach. And that's where I'm having a challenge tonight coming up with this language. So, yeah.
So this is the first time we've heard anything about that in answer to this question. That might change it. But I also got the impression from you that you use this location to fund other hostel locations up and down the coast. So there's some margin built into what you charge here to cover costs there, also I assume at their low periods of the year, so that you have a constantly running network of hostels.
That's correct. Now, February, we might not be having any other places, so we try to bank that away into the summer months so we can run the other hostels.
So I think we're on the same page generally, which is we want this to be a place where low-income earners, particularly low-income earners from inland or deprived, but lower socioeconomic groups, people who don't have a lot of cash, can come and experience the coast. That's our primary aim. You don't appear to have fleshed out how you're going to do that at this stage.
Not yet.
So our concern, or my concern, and I think some of the others, is to ensure that this doesn't get away from us into a higher retail element and become just another place that's a high cost, high benefit outcome place, that it is in fact genuinely a hostel that mixes all sorts of people. Let me go to a couple of other quick other questions. So I had a look at your transport demand management return. It appears that this hostel only employs one person that works in Santa Monica. And is there any way that you could lift the number of people who work in Santa Monica? This goes to the trips.
Sure. So currently we're right total, well, prior to furloughs based upon COVID, we're just under 30. The expectation is that we'll be closer to 35 with the expansion for overall employees. On a given day, say 15 to 18.
Would work in Santa Monica?
Would work in Santa Monica.
I mean, would live in Santa Monica.
Oh, would live in Santa Monica.
Yeah. Well.
Sorry for living in Santa Monica. It is likely very low because of the cost of living. Most of our employees say they can't afford to live in Santa Monica. So.
Do you conduct a hire local program?
We don't necessarily restrict from it, but
could you consider that?
We could consider that, yeah. But yeah, we wouldn't be opposed to that at all. So yeah, no problem.
Okay, so that would be a step in the right direction. You realise once you go above 30 that you'll then be in a different level of transport demand management, providing transport subsidies and so on. There are 6 people who drive cars. Are they primarily the managers at this location?
Yes.
Is there any way you could dissuade them from driving cars?
We're compensating for transportation passes.
Okay.
It's going to be, I think, as other folks. I mean, I think if it's called an AVR, is at 2.2 on this project. We will have our work cut out for us in promoting multiple different approaches and incentives with staff so that we can reach that number.
I mean, again, the notion of a hostel in the European context is an incredibly environmentally friendly resource for travellers and low-income earners, and it's very sustainable. And I think that would be a perfect thing to have down there, and that's what I'm urging you to do. So Commissioner Fonda Bernardi was asking about solar and sustainability and derivation of energy from renewable sources. I wasn't completely understanding that there was this commitment to derive as much energy as possible from renewable sources. Just we'll look at it. What's your commitment on that, or the commitment of your architect?
That's our commitments there. So just as an example, even projects that aren't new development. I mean, within the last 2 years, we put an array on San Francisco hostel, and we've also just completed one in Point Loma just before in San Diego. So we're committed in that situation, and nothing was forcing us to do that other than our commitment to a triple bottom line, and environmental sustainability as part of that triple bottom line. And in this project, when it's just there in development, it's ripe for it. So the commitment's fully there. The question is just how much can we maximize? I'd say where the challenge comes is if we're looking towards the east side of the roof and trying to relocate all the mechanical off the top of that roof, that's where it becomes complicated. But where we have the roof space is maximizing as much as we can. That the large apartment building does cause a lot of shadow, but I'm trying to make that.
I think Commissioner Fonda Bernardi's question is actually a Trojan horse. He's asking about solar, but what he really means is how can you drive maximum amounts of renewable energy and make this building so sustainable that your energy demands, water demands, and so on are reduced. Now, obviously, through a CUP process, we can't insist on that. When we were in the DA, we were pretty tough. It would be great if your thinking was to take us to that place. Is that really where your commitment is?
Our commitment is as far as we can go with the plant we have, or the facility we have. Yes.
So that's
understanding that guests are sometimes hard to control for their consumption. But yes.
Well, I think you're in the toughest business of all, which is you can't control water consumption of a hostel arrangement.
Well, can I just give you an example, if I can waste your time for 1 minute on? We have, working with Booking.com, which is an online booking agency, provided us as a nonprofit grant with a French company and also the George Washington University on designing a shower head that we've installed that changes colors through LED light as the water usage happens. And there's signage in our bathrooms that explains that. And then we have something that's called the million gallon challenge that we took on, just to try to encourage our guests while they're in our hostel to reduce the color to the lower color, to control the amount they're using in our bathrooms, and then try to suggest, now that you've experienced that, take that home and follow the same protocol when you get home. So there's an example of where we try to get creative on sustainability.
Excellent. Then my final question. You will lower the floor of the wrap saloon. At one stage, I believe, Santa Monica Town Hall, and take away the 2 steps at the front. Is it your long-term thinking that that could be turned into an all-day cafe, refreshment, something along those lines?
Our commitment is to have it as a community, somewhat of a community center where community nonprofit groups can use the space for their programming the same way we do the programming. Often we'll ask them that if it's appropriate, that our guests can be involved in their programming that they're doing in their space. that is an element that we have at many of our hostels, and our expectation is to keep it exactly that way. At some point, we have other retail space in the new construction. The expectation is not to turn it into food and beverage, but that would take another approval process. But that we have additional space that we could look towards doing that. Our preference is for the wrap to be that community space, but with lots of kind of cultural arts things going on in it also, and that would be the preference.
Well, my question is, I really want you to activate the street. And so if it's not a cafe, it's something that has activity backwards and forwards rather than that dead facade that sometimes can present. Thank you, Chair.
I just have a few questions. Can you tell me again what the total construction time period is?
The total.
When you
You want to answer that one, Aaron?
Oh, you go. Go ahead. I'm fine.
So obviously there's a lot of preparation and work that needs to be done in preparation. So for instance, there's a big utilities. We've got a new transformer. We've got to move an existing vault, all things of that nature. So there's a lot of preparation that's going on beforehand. But the schedule for that is about a month or two for the preparation of it, about a month or two for doing the podium and all of that kind of work through there. And then probably within about a week, we should have all of the modular units stacked. And then there'll be probably another couple of months to finish off interior work and connect everything up and connect up all the utilities and things of that nature. So the total time is somewhere in the order of about 6 months.
Wow.
Do you have any comments on that?
Me? Aaron?
Oh yeah, no, thanks, Gwen. It's really great, this modular, how you can do everything in parallel. You're setting up the site and you're building your podium while off someplace else all the modular units are getting constructed. And we're really working hard on getting as much done in these prefabricated modular units. So when they arrive, you're having to tie in plumbing and things like that, but a lot of the interior is already done. So we're just reducing the amount of labor that's kind of showing up on site and making noise.
So in terms of actual construction activity, meaning noise, dust, whatever the heck, you're really only talking about 4 months, because the last month is interiors and the first month is prep.
Yeah, for that even, probably closer to 3 months.
So that's amazing. So 3 months of potential impact from construction. And then I was confused, the MOU or MOA or whatever it is that you have with the city for the affordable hotel money, does that actually set rates or just say affordable?
The memorandum agreement itself doesn't set rates. I believe that there's the grant agreement itself sets rates, which I don't have in front of me. But the memorandum of agreement indicates the concept that it shall be used for affordable lodging for the lifetime of the improvements.
And it's 20 years or lifetime, whichever's less, right?
No, whichever is greater.
Oh my God. So you basically have a rate structure that is forever?
The rate structure, as I understand it, is in a separate agreement. And that's the grant agreement, and I don't have that.
Grant from the city?
Yes, because of this affordable lodging
Right.
mitigation fee. And so when they apply for it, if they're the recipient, then there's a separate agreement. And, Aaron is going to be much more familiar than I am with that documentation.
So theoretically, if somebody proposed setting rate caps tonight, which we don't have the legal authority for doing, that could contradict this agreement with the city that does actually have a fee structure, correct?
Yes.
Or our additional seeking for funds on a new grant from the city, and for also grants coming out of the mitigation fund for the Coastal Commission. That's where I get concerned about language tonight. But yeah.
And the Coastal Commission does not actually set, I know this, does not set room rates, right? They just say affordable.
That's correct, although they can restrict us if they grant us money. So they can't set them in general for the coastal development permit, but in the instance, the same as that's what the city of Santa Monica is, because we received grant funds for the development, then they have more authority.
It would be really useful to see what that agreement is that has the fee structure. And then, did I understand correctly? I don't think I did. That the actual family rooms are going to stay as family rooms. You don't anticipate making those dorm rooms at some point in the future, correct?
The project always was expecting to have some family rooms. It was going to be more, the expansion was going to be more dorms, but always some family rooms. And then it's just because of COVID, because the footprint is exactly the same. So it's right. Somewhat easy to convert from a 4-bedded dorm to a family room through development. And where COVID is, that we'd just be focusing maybe initially on those just being the private rooms versus the dorms. Because we already have the dorms in the current facility, and we're just concerned what we're going to do about dorms during COVID. So.
And finally, just out of curiosity, is it sort of the business model of Hostel International to set aside some of the funds that makes up one facility to build another one elsewhere? Is that the business model that's pretty universally done?
That's where that money is needed for our equity position in a new development in a different location. So those funds do need to come through those. They can come through donations too, so there's assortment of where those funds could come from.
It's very much how nonprofit housing is developed, by the way.
Yeah,
exactly the same model. Okay, so here we are. I think that's all the questions for you. I'm sorry, Commissioner Fresco. You have to unmute yourself.
I was ready to discuss, that's all.
Okay, so the public hearing is closed, and the matter is now before the commission. Commissioner Fresco, if you guys don't use the chat room, I'm going to blow up my computer, okay?
Okay. I will use the chat room after this.
Well, you've already raised your hand, and so has Sean. So the next one. Commissioner Fresco.
All right. I just wanted to start by giving y'all just a crash course on this whole step thing and how I see it and how it's evolved. So basically, the Rap Saloon was built in 1875. It was a saloon until 1887 when the city started charging licenses for alcohol, and that was too expensive. So after that, it became a rental space. It was rented by the Salvation Army, blah, blah, blah. Around 1917, it was rented for an automotive use. Tire stores used it. It was radiator repair, stuff like that. It was in those uses for 20 years, and that's when those doors were added, and that was when it was changed. It was the first way before. Then it was a piano repair store. The picture Mr. Pugh showed you that I hadn't seen before was from the piano store era, and that lasted until 1963. And shortly after that, the original owners, the son of the Rapp family, who was an octogenarian by then, finally sold the property to somebody. In 1964, the city, a city council member said, "This is the oldest building standing in Santa Monica, and we should save it." And that began a 20-year advocacy program or effort to save the building from raising money, finding new locations. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Little shotgun housey, maybe? Mario recognizes it. 20 years go by. During that time, a landmarks commission is established with a landmarks ordinance. It becomes the first landmark because everyone's really into the Rap Saloon. And finally, in the mid-'80s, the Hosteling International steps on the scene, the hero. They embrace I almost said shotgun house. They embrace the Rap Saloon. They do an amazing restoration, and that is where it is now. So what is a restoration? Typically, when you have a building that has changed many times and you restore it, you pick a period and you collect the evidence about that period and you restore it to that period. So at that time in the 1980s, they restored this building to the earliest known format of the building. And that is the two photographs I sent you. One, the steps were really blurry. We didn't really know exactly what they looked like, but we knew they were there. You could see how the door was. And you can see that they really faithfully restored it. I've seen the plans from 1983 when they were first drawn up, and they had notes in them that said, reproduce this window frame to be exactly like the original one that is in there. So this was really a very faithful restoration. They put the floor in, the raised floor was restored because they could see where old floor joists had been, and so they knew exactly where it was. So it created an accessibility problem, which they solved with the ramp. So today, we still have the same owner, and the ramp is problematic. Figuring out the best way to do accessibility in a historic building is always a challenge, as Mario and I experienced at the Shotgun House. We tried many, many things before we found the right solution. So when I hear that cutting that doorway down from what is currently a well-restored doorway to something that is considered an improvement is not a historic preservation practice. That doesn't mean that you can't make this much better for accessibility, but I don't think this is the solution. And I think the applicant needs to go back to the drawing board and try a million other things, and maybe taking advantage of some of the lobby behind. I don't know. I'm not going to solve it. I can't solve it. But saying those steps are not original because they were restored is really not appropriate. And so that's just not how we would treat a historic building in best practices. So I don't believe that kind of a change, considering that this building has been restored to the era between 1875 and 1915, that cutting that step is compliant with standard 2 of the Secretary of Interior standards that says that the historic character is retained and preserved. So I had some conditions that I wanted to add to bring attention to a point of view of that sort for the Landmarks Commission. And I can present them now or later. I'll wait until after the discussion when we're closer to a motion, because I know everybody has other things to say. There was one other. I guess that kind of wraps up where I stand on that. I just also need to note that the plaque that is on the front of this building is incorrect. And it says that it was used as the town hall from May 1887 to January 1889, but it was actually May 1888 to January 1889. It was only for a few short months. And that is a hugely disturbing and misleading thing. And also just I really am thrilled and excited to hear that the hosteling people really would like to retain the Rap Saloon as a public access place and as a form of disclosure. I have personally presented lectures there for a nonprofit, and I had to practically hang over the stair railing in order to show my presentation on a screen and not be in front of the screen at the same time. So there you have it.
I just had a Landmarks Commission flashback. Thank you for that.
You're very welcome. I can tell you more stories later.
Commissioner Landris.
So I am generally supportive of this project, but I believe that it needs the update to the project description. So I would be interested in moving the staff report with amendments as need to be made in the interest of getting this moving forward. But I want to observe, we are down to 5 commissioners. That we don't need to make sure they're good with 5 moving forward, right? We're too late. So but I would like to, there's language.
Who doesn't count?
Still talking. I would like to know if there's language from the applicant on the project. And then I would like to move the staff report with that language, but I need that language to be able to make my motion.
Do you think we can come up with that language?
It's voluntary on the part of the applicant, and so if they are volunteering it, I would like to, the language that I'm looking for would affirm the public benefit purpose of the project and the intent to make the rooms and beds available at affordable rates indefinitely, consistent with the public benefit mission of the applicant and the existing restrictions on the project.
So Aaron said he may need his board's approval. So if that's the case, what do you propose?
Sean, can I ask a question? Sean, can I take a stab at something? I have no idea if this is going to get you to where you want to go, but in the project description right now, it talks about this being a 4-story affordable lodging hostel. And then the very next line, it says the expansion results in 40 additional guest rooms. Can't we just slide in between additional and guest rooms affordable?
I think we could. I'm looking at this. Can we, what I would be comfortable with is 40 additional affordable guest rooms and a slash of some number of beds, because we have a bed count and this is a hostel, which I believe is a bed count issue. Can Heidi or Jing, can we get clarity on whether we're allowed to do bed counts here?
Aren't the beds in the guest rooms?
Well, it's a new 4-story, 200-bed hostel. That was in 1987. There was a DR in 1987 for a 200-bed hostel. And then in 2002, the staff report doesn't say how many beds there were. And on page, it's in the plans. Hang on. I found it earlier. Just a second. I will tell everybody. It's page 80. I want to say 89 of the staff report on PDF. No, 85. It's a list of beds and rooms. And it shows the addition because let me explain why. At the moment, they are saying that they are a hostel, and with respect to land use, that is, here we go. They are asking for 88 total guest rooms. I'm on page 81 of the staff report. Heidi or Jing, what can we say here? Do we have to say rooms or can we say beds?
You can. I would recommend maybe you speak to the applicant about what that is, because the floor plans do not show like bed outline. So I don't think again, what's shown on there is the rooms, and it's delineated as like dorm room or family room. But it's not clear to us how many beds might be in a dorm room, for example. So I would suggest that perhaps we ask the applicant to respond to what a bed count might look like.
Okay, so can we ask the applicant, because the applicant is now running the risk that we will be drafting this language. So what would the applicant like to do? Can we re-promote somebody?
Am I okay? Am I back on?
Yeah, we can see you. Okay, yeah, and I see you both. Okay,
great. Hey, so bed counts, fine. I'm going to do a little math here. I can tell you what it is for the 46 new modular rooms, which is 188. but we have a little bit of math because we removed some rooms to create the access to the new construction. So the overall project, I'd have to be challenged on that. But for the new modular unit, it would be 188.
Okay, so my following, since we're talking, are you comfortable with that language? What we would be saying is at the beginning of the SOA, let me bring this up again. We would be talking about in the project description, the expansion includes 40 additional affordable hostel guest rooms / 188 hostel beds, affordable hostel beds, a renovated dining hall and a central courtyard.
Good.
And Ken, I just need to make sure that the hostel reference for all 188 beds doesn't limit the ability for these family rooms that are considered more private than shared dorms.
Right. If I look at the description of the hotel worker protection and the as well as the lodging description, there's nothing that says a hostel cannot have private rooms. It's as the planning manager pointed out, as Jing pointed out, there's an amenity issue, but I'm assuming that you're not going to turn those guest rooms into, spa day guest rooms. You're just providing simple guest rooms with ensuite bathrooms, but I've stayed in hostels that had those.
Right. Yeah, so specifically during COVID time. Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah.
That wasn't me.
Oh, it wasn't you. Oh, sorry.
But Mr. Pritchard, are you comfortable with that language?
Yeah, I'd like to look closely at the definition, which I haven't outside the zoning ordinance of hostel.
Okay, so the definition of a hostel, I'll read it to you. Hotel does not include a hostel, which is a lodging facility primarily characterized by dormitory-style accommodations, shared bathrooms, and reservations of beds rather than rooms. So
where's that from? Where's that from?
That is 4.67.010, the Hotel Worker Protection Ordinance.
Thank you.
Because hostel is otherwise not defined, because in 9.51030, hostel and hotel are included in the definition of lodging. Right? So hotel and motel, this is not a bed and breakfast, and this is not a vacation rental. Hotel and motel is, this use classification includes motor lodges, motels, apartment hotels, hostels, and tourist ports. What it doesn't include is SRO housing, just for the record.
Commissioner Landris, may I just jump in for a moment? Because I don't want there to be confusion. You're reading a definition from the Hotel Worker Protection Ordinance, which is not the zoning ordinance. Right. So, but are you intending to apply that definition to this land use entitlement, or are you just providing it as an example? Because I just want clarity as to what we're...
I think that what I'm trying to do, I can't speak for Commissioner McKinnon on this because he's been raising this as well. I wanted to essentially alert the applicant that as long as the applicant's operating this operation consistent with HIUSA's mission and operations, as I understand them, there's no issue. But if they if they convert their entire operation to guest rooms and they remove dorms, they could expect, not by this body, but they could expect people concerned with hotel worker protection to inquire as to whether or not that has changed their definition, not with respect to land use policy, but with respect to other city regulations, has changed the hotel, changed them into a hotel. So I think what they're trying to be careful about is whether or not the language here would kind of come back to bite them. And what I'm looking for is language that really doesn't cause a problem as long as they do what they're going to say they're going to do. But if anyone else were to come along, or if they were to change what they were going to do, that they understand that their questions could be asked. That's very direct. I mean, we're constrained.
I think we got it.
Right?
Right. Yeah. I again, because we're talking about a STOA for this STOA language or description language in the STOA for this CUP. I appreciate you bringing up that ordinance, but again, if you use the word hostel within this STOA, you know, there is no land use definition. I just want there to be a clear understanding of that. There is obviously a definition for the purposes of the hotel worker protection ordinance, you know, and that's a separate issue than this. So, you know, I just don't want there to be a misunderstanding or a mixing of those two things.
I think since it's clear that we're talking about a hostel facility and it's an expansion to an existing hostel facility, I'm okay with leaving out the word hostel, but I think we need to say 40 additional affordable guest rooms / 188 additional affordable beds.
And that was Jim's language, correct? Yeah.
And that was, I was adding beds. Jim added the word affordable before guest rooms. I wanted to add the reference to beds as well.
Okay. So does that satisfy you?
I'm good with it if the applicant and Jim are good with it, and I'd actually like to hear what Richard thinks, because I think we're trying to.
I'll move on to him next, but that meets your needs.
For me, that's my motion. My motion is the staff report amending the description of the project to read: the expansion includes 40 additional affordable guest rooms / 188 affordable beds, a renovated dining hall, and a central courtyard. I'm making that motion.
Okay. Commissioner McKinnon.
There's a problem with the math here, because 40 times 4 is not 188. So even if you have 4 beds per room for whatever use, whether family or dorm, you'd be at 160 beds.
Okay, so.
What if you have 3 children?
Yeah, they can share a bunk bed or something like that, but what will actually be available, even if you squeeze in somebody extra or have a slide-out bed, although these are fairly small rooms, you'd still essentially have 4 beds. You might be able to put a cot in or get 2 kids to share a bed, true, but the number of beds would be 4 per room, whether it's family or dorm.
Is that, can the applicant confirm that you're maxing at 4 people per unit no matter what?
The 2 ADA rooms can actually fit 6, so it like that flexibility. So that's a slightly
162 beds.
So it would be, if we're taking the 40, so it's 164.
Fine. So my motion is with 164, but my motion still doesn't have a second, so this may be moot.
Would somebody please second it just so we can discuss it?
Yeah, I will second it just to move this puppy along.
Great. Thank you, Jim.
Okay. Commissioner McKinnon. Actually, before we go on, Heidi has asked to speak if anybody wants to address the historic preservation question, or even if not, she wanted to come in and talk about it.
Love to hear from Heidi.
Heidi.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I just want to clarify what's in front of you this evening. And part of what you're doing is to move the project forward is finding that the project is exempt under CEQA under category 31, which means that the restoration is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. So if you do not agree with the evidence that is presented to you, which is in the consultant's report done by the city, and I believe, as Grace explained, that there was additional evidence before you, finding with consistency with the standards, then you are not able to act this evening because that CEQA exemption would not be available to you. So I just want to clarify that. So you can't condition it to make it consistent with the standards because of your CEQA exemption that is before you.
Okay.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up question, Heidi? What did the Landmarks Commission do in 2018 or 2019 regarding the proposed project? Did they take an action or just look at it?
I believe there was just a concept review presented. In 2018, they may have landmarked the entire parcel. Grace might be able to help with that. As opposed to, I think it's on 2 parcels. I believe only half of the entire parcel was actually considered a landmark parcel. So in 2018, that was expanded in order to help protect the Rap Saloon, and that means that creates the jurisdiction for the Landmarks Commission to review all of it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner McKinnon?
Can I clarify that statement? What we just heard was basically we can't approve the project and then have a condition to the landmarks that say we're not really comfortable with the stairs going away because we don't think those are consistent with the historic nature. Is that what I heard?
Well, so Grace and the planning manager can give you more detail from a technical perspective. There is some flexibility when interpreting what it means to be consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. So I think that's where staff can help you with that. The concern that I have from a legal perspective is a determination by this body that removing the stairs would render the whole project inconsistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. That's where you would have a problem because you would have a CEQA issue at that point.
So that sounds like yes. If we have a problem with the stairs, we can't really use that exemption tonight.
Well, unfortunately, it's not quite that straightforward. It means if you believe that removing the stairs takes it out of this being consistent, because there are 9 different standards that you look, 9 or 10 different standards that you look at. It does not require exacting consistency with each one of those in order to make the finding for consistency with the standards in general. So you have more flexibility than that. I just don't want you to have this. I just think it's concerning to have a bright line rule that that the whole project doesn't conform.
Richard, it's your turn.
Yes, I'd like to hear from Commissioner Fresco, though. She has.
Commissioner Fresco.
Because Heidi jumped in there, I just wanted to present the conditions related to that I had while we're all talking about it, if that's okay with you guys.
So are you proposing those as amendments to the motion?
Yes.
Yes, we're listening.
Okay, so there's 3. The applicant shall submit a plan for the protection of the landmark Rap Saloon during the construction of the hostel expansion. The plan shall be approved by the Landmarks Commission as part of the COA for the project. It shall include but not be limited to procedures that ensure that modular building components will not be suspended over the historic resource at any time. I think it's pretty obvious why.
Yeah, that's a good
Very friendly.
Buildings on my landmark. Okay. Number 2, the Landmarks Commission shall pay particular, I haven't actually discussed this, but I think it's self-explanatory also. The Landmarks Commission shall pay particular attention to the finishes of the new rear elevation relative to the appearance of the existing 2nd Street elevation to ensure the building retains a holistic appearance. And that's just based on a comment the Commission gave us, and just like their regular ARB duties, I just didn't want it to be all choppy. And then this is my way of just addressing the stairs and just letting the Commission know that we hopefully have a position on those, and this goes like this. The Landmarks Commission shall pay particular attention to meeting the desired program for the historic structure that does not reverse previous efforts to restore its integrity as viewed from the public right-of-way.
Those are friendly to me if they're friendly to Jim.
Yeah, it's fine with them.
Yep.
Beautiful.
So that, Nina, that doesn't stipulate that they have to keep the stairs. It just says they need
to. It doesn't say they have to. It just says they have to work on adapting the building for ADA and not improving the building.
Can I ask a clarification? Can I just ask, as part of understanding that it's friendly, would that also potentially say, since there were drugs and dancing in the old Rap Saloon, there could be drugs and dancing in the restored drug saloon?
Yeah. Well, actually, I had some comments about the dancing, if you must know, because the Rap Saloon actually shut down when the city started making laws about that, because the whole purpose of the liquor licenses was for temperance and those sorts of things. And then after the city trustees stopped meeting there, it was the home of the Salvation Army, and they were not so into dancing. And then after they left, it was the socialist headquarters for Santa Monica. And they had all of their meetings, and they were also big temperance, no fun people. So I think the no dancing thing is actually appropriate.
Except that in 1875 there was still dancing, I believe, right?
People kept dancing throughout, regardless of all these rules and
We're a lot heavier than they were back there.
There could be an intemperate space.
Okay, Sean, I'm going to take a few minutes off. Okay, can you take over?
Yeah, sure.
And Richard,
Okay.
Richard is finally next. I think Jim actually has a comment after Richard.
Okay.
So I'd be happy if Jim went first if he's got a comment to add to the motion.
Well, my comment is I think we're trying to address this with the affordability issue. I'm comfortable down that road. I don't quite understand why we need the beds, but maybe Sean and I offline, we can talk about that. I'm happy to leave it in there. I would say the other side was the applicant was concerned about the use of the word hostel. It's already in the project description in the line before. So if they didn't have a problem with it coming into the hearing, they probably shouldn't have a problem with it today. I think that the modular is very exciting. This is the first one that we're seeing, and you're seeing the benefit of it is from the construction timeline. There's very little construction done out on site. And, once again, I agree with Mario that we should try to be pushing the sustainability issues more. I don't know, we have our hands tied on that. The lesson I think I'm learning in my time on commissions and in development is let's try to make it as energy efficient as possible. And I heard the applicant talking about how they were going to change out some electrical vaults, which means they're doing a pretty significant upgrade to the project. I'm hoping they can expand that a little bit into the existing facility, but we don't really have the authority to do that. With that, I am prepared to move forward with the project. I would ask staff in the future when they bring us a class 32 to also show us the studies as well.
Okay, we have a request from Grace to speak, but before I do that, Jim, just on your concern about the beds, I think
please, I don't want to do it now. I'd rather not do it now. It's in the motion.
No. I just have a simplification that might be better if we agree on it, which is rather than include the number of beds, describe them as affordable dormitory / guest rooms, because the issue is the dorm. The issue is the dorm quality of the hostel rather than the bed count. So dormitory / guest rooms without a bed count might be less prescriptive and get us where we want to go.
It's pretty much, it seems fine either way with me.
Okay. All right. Well, we can then leave it as is, and if folks want to change it, we can. And as far as your comment on the sustainability piece, I am wondering whether, and I don't know that we can put this in the STOA because it's outside but I'd love to have it on the record. They have a zero waste initiative in New York City. They have a 1 million gallon challenge that is in a bunch of places. They have green certifications. What I would love to hear from the applicant is a commitment whenever possible to bring these initiatives to the Santa Monica location. It's nice that they're doing it, but if we don't know that they're doing it in Santa Monica, it's not necessarily advancing our environmental goals. So could we hear a commitment from the applicant to bring those initiatives to Santa Monica?
The commissioners completely. No question.
Okay. No question, yes. Yes, thank you.
Are you marketing those shower heads? Because those sound pretty interesting.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, we're going to expand upon it. We're actually doing some academic research on the impact it has on people if they get back home from George Washington University. So once this gets more fleshed out, we'll see. The folks we're partnering with in France, I think, which is a for-profit entity, I think they're the ones that are going to end up marketing these things. But yeah, it's an interesting concept.
Great. So I'm glad to hear that you're up for bringing those innovations to Santa Monica. Grace, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. If I could request Commissioner Fresco to send over that drafted language for the friendly amendments that you would propose. And I just want to make
it for you.
Okay, and I just want to make it clear that, you know, in the proposed protection plan that Landmarks would look at, it would be for that component of the construction management plan, not the entirety of the construction management plan. Is that fair to say that was the direction?
Yeah, I meant that if there are other things that come up that they think protections that the Rap Saloon needs, depending on whatever plan ends up being approved. You know, maybe they think the doorways need to be padded, or I don't know. So I just didn't want to only have it do that.
So if I may just piggyback on that just quickly, I think to Grace's question, that is, there will be a point where it's going to be outside the purview of the Landmarks Commission with respect to a C of A. So I think she wanted to clarify that here, but of course we will be watching that when it comes to the Landmarks Commission, because they're essentially, you know, ensuring the protection of the landmark. But at a certain point, if it's not related to that, it would be outside of their purview and would just be just fall under the construction management plan ordinance.
Well, the construction management plan and all the conditions that are already in there are designed to protect the neighborhood and the street. And this is really just about the landmark. And I know they're careful about craning giant building parts over live human beings. And I basically would like the Rap Saloon to be considered like a live human being relative to a crane.
Richard, did you get to talk?
No, not yet. So I think that we should support this. This is a useful expansion of low-cost accommodation right in the heart of the downtown, which is what we want. It will be basically unseen from 2nd Street. It will impose some difficulty on the people who are living in the building behind it, regrettably, but it brings a whole host of new visitors to Santa Monica as long as we can protect them. I think if we go to, I think it's 60 additional affordable rooms in the extension, that might be the most sensible outcome, because that projects 60 times 4 whatever, rather than beds. That would be one thing I would offer. I think Commissioner Fresco's 3 conditions seem perfectly reasonable. I'm uncertain as to whether that means the stairs are staying or the stairs are going. But I have no great feeling for it one way or another, although it would be great to activate that space and make it much more an integral part of what is happening on 2nd Street, so that we make 2nd Street a much more lively street. So, but I understand the parameters of that landmark. I do think there are a couple of points. Point 4, the illegal drugs, I'd take that out. Point 6, in the STOA, the suggestion that, serious suggestion that it says no dancing, live entertainment or amplified music shall be permitted on the outdoor spaces. It nominates roof deck, central courtyard and entry court. Surely we're open to music on the entry court on 2nd Street. Wouldn't that be something that we might think is okay? So I'd like to take out the entry court from that provision, and that protects the people at the back, but allows us again to activate that front area, which is respectfully rather dead at the moment. And with that, I would support that, because it seems to me the protections are in place. I would encourage the applicant to be as strong and as powerful as they can be on the sustainability issues. And beyond that, it seems to me that this is a very good development moving forward for the city and for the people we're trying to serve.
That's friendly to me as the maker. Can I clarify that we are changing 40 affordable guest rooms / 164 affordable beds to 40 affordable dormitories / guest rooms? Can we do that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we're making that change, and we're removing the reference to illegal drugs, and we're removing the restriction on amplification on the front, on the 2nd Street entry. Jim, are we good with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that. Since Richard brought it up, if they have a courtyard that now has a 5-story structure behind it, is that noise really going to bother people, or is there some amplified music allowed in that courtyard?
How about not amplified?
Acoustic?
Well, it's still subject to the noise ordinance, so I would say don't restrict it in the courtyard at ground level if it's surrounded by buildings.
With a time on it, with like 10 p.m. or something.
Yeah, that's good. Are we good?
Mario?
Like Commissioner
I would second what Jim was saying. I don't think the amplified music in the bottom of a 5-story well is going to disturb anybody. The one that might disturb people is that roof deck that would be obviously knocking right into that building on Ocean Avenue. But I think we should remove if they want to dance in their courtyard, knock themselves out. I think it'd be a wonderful addition.
Yeah, as long as the roof deck stays unamplified, I think that's important. I agree with that.
John, I have one addition. I like Nina's conditions. I would say that as long as it doesn't jeopardize the ability to use manufactured components, because using that obviously is going to greatly reduce construction time, meaning hassle for the people behind it.
We still don't want those modular units dangling over the wrap saloon.
No, totally get that, but it's like, really? I mean, as long as whatever materials, colors, whatever the Landmarks Commission comes up with, it doesn't jeopardize the ability to use manufactured components.
Well, that part will have been approved already by us. They can't change that.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then it's good. All right, Mario.
Thank you.
We're getting
I would like to say one thing before we take a vote. You know, we rarely get an owner, let's say, who's doing everything right. When you think of what these people are doing, they're taking care of the traffic issues. They're struggling with the sustainability issue, but they were dealt with that problem with the pre-existing condition of the building to the west of them. They are providing us a community room. They are making that community room actually accessible, which it barely is now because it requires all this ramp that takes up all this space in what is otherwise a very small, tiny little hall, in effect. And best of all, they're providing basically affordable hotel space or hostel space in a world where everybody's going to be poorer. You know, there's going to be a lot of people trying to get into these relatively inexpensive room because nobody else in the universe can afford it. And they're doing all this in this very dangerous environment that they know that dormitories are COVID virus incubators. You know, you put a bunch of people together and they're not separated from each other, and it's a very risky world. So they're being very brave and very forward-thinking in trying to do something we want as a city at their own risk. They're doing it at their own risk because they get one incident and it runs away from them, and that building is emptied. That building provides no income. It just becomes a big husk of a 5-story shell, basically. And, you know, we live in a brave new world. And so when people are willing to be taking chances in this environment to our benefit, we should be very helpful for them. And I hope they considered everything we talked about being helpful.
Thank you, Mario.
I hope they're still going to do it after what you've just said, because.
And I mean, if we can just say this, I really appreciate, I mean, it was an education for me to read their annual report and to read their 990, because it's very clear that this is an organization that has been dedicated to this type of activity, to making not just affordable lodging, but we're in an era of deep misunderstanding among different groups of people. And what my takeaway from their annual report is that this is an organization that isn't just about making travel affordable, it's about connecting people across lines of difference. And in an era when our, immigration office is about to run out of money and prevent people from crossing borders. And in an era when Americans can't go to Europe because we can't get it together to control a pandemic, here is an organization that's dedicated to building bridges. So I just am really appreciative of that opportunity to support that work appropriately at this moment in time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. I think one of the reasons it's taken us almost 3 hours to do this is it's really unusual for us to deal with cases that involve well-intended people. So it's been a challenge for us tonight. And I must say also that we, to my knowledge, have never put CCSM or Step Up on Second through what we put you guys through tonight. So anyway, with that, let's have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Fonda Bernardi,
Yes.
Commissioner Fresco,
Yes.
Commissioner Landris,
Yes.
Commissioner McKinnon,
Yes.
Commissioner Reese,
Yes.
Chair Lambert.
Yes. Thank you very much, Aaron. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Appreciate it. Thank you for nice words also.
Yes.
I just want to, I think there were actually three permits in all of this, so I think you intended to vote. You intended to vote on all three.
Yes.
Okay.
Right, Sean?
My motion was for all three.
Okay. Thank you.
So is the second.
What?
So is the second.
He's just confirming that he seconded all three.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm losing my mind here. Okay, folks. I am going to call for an adjournment, and I will see.
Just before we go,
Uh-huh.
say thank you to Melissa, who I think is doing a really great job under very difficult circumstances. And those emails keep coming in, and they're sort of always right on top of it. And she reads those chits beautifully too.
Yeah.
So, Melissa, thank you very much.
Thank
really
you.
done a great job so far. And we really appreciate it all. I do know that.
I think we should have her read the testimony for the rest of our lives.
There you go.
In fact, I'm going to
job security.
Can I ask one question about that as we're heading to adjournment, which is because we have been meeting not at our regular time, we have technically been in special mode, which means that we do not have general public comment. And if this sort of goes back to Richard's question earlier, if we are going to stay at this time, can we make this our regular time, or can we otherwise provide some opportunity for general public comment? We rarely get it, but it's been months, and I think in the interest of public engagement, we ought to make room for it at some point.
I miss Jerry Rubin.
So procedurally, just to let you know, procedurally, you would have to adopt a resolution to change your regular meeting time. However, the Brown Act does not prohibit you from taking general public comment during special meetings. So that's something that
let's do that. Let's put that on the agenda for next time.
Yeah, let's have. Could we have general public comment on our agenda next time?
She just said so.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay,
Great.
so we are hereby adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.